music is a really strange thing. And it's so strange because it moves people. It doesn't feed anybody. It doesn't even educate anybody in any meaningful way.
It feeds you.
Huh? Feeds me.
Yeah.
Feeds me. And I've been fascinated by the subject of why does Homo sapiens do music? What's it for? What's its evolutionary purpose? And why do I get so richly rewarded by society for banging shit? But the strangest thing about music of all, and I'm hoping that Dr. Levitin will illuminate this burning question. Well, there's so many, but let's just start with the fact that music is the only art form that physically usurps motor control of your body. It makes you twitch. Rembrandt doesn't move, physically make you move. Shakespeare, no. You know, a great movie might move you emotionally, but only music physically grabs your body and makes you twitch, makes you move. And not just random movements, specifically sexual display. That is the movement that music makes you do. It's good for marching, of course, but mainly it's for sex. It's also for love. It's also for combining a society, and we can get into some of this later. But I'm hoping that the professor will explain why music will make you do stuff that would be very embarrassing and probably even illegal to do in public without music. What's happening here neurologically?
Well, so we have evolved automatic direct connections between the eardrum and the motion centers, the motor centers of the brain.
And the penis. Let's keep it academic.
You did use the academic term.
Yeah. Don't get me started.
It goes back, so the hearing sense began with fish, actually. Fish have something that's like a tympanic membrane along the sides of their bodies. And the function of that was to be able to detect the presence of other things in the water, based on the water's patterns of movement. They, where it's down below the sea level where it's dark, they can't see well. There's not a lot of light, so they have to be able to detect if they're swimming towards something that could harm them, like a big rock or a predator or something. And so the motion of the water impinges on the sides of their bodies, this membrane, and transmits information about the environment. And that evolved over millions of years into our eardrums, which wiggle in and out in response to movement of molecules. And one of the primary purposes of the sense of hearing from an evolutionary standpoint is to help us react to things we can't see because it's dark or we're in a cave or whatever it is around a corner. So the hearing sense allows us to sense things at a distance, as does vision. Compare it to smell, where whatever it is the smell is, it pretty much has to be really close to you. Taste has to be even closer as a sense, right? You don't taste things that are far away. So hearing evolved in parallel to vision as a way to sense things going on that you could not see and to get you out of the way if something was about to happen that could harm you. So this direct connection is pre-thought. It's pre-decision-making, pre-cognitive. It's that you hear a sudden loud sound and you jump. And it better be that way, because if a lion is coming towards you or an avalanche is coming towards you, you don't have time to stop and think, well, the angle of incidence is about 33 degrees, and if I move my left leg this way, no, at that point you're lunch for the tiger or you're smashed by the rock. So this instantaneous movement that comes from sound is an evolutionary adaptation. It's also been co-opted over evolutionary...
Can I add another
Please.
Instance of that?
Does it involve
She's
penises
hot.
again? Yeah, well, that's right. It does involve penises then.
As you were saying.
Yes. So, The startle reflex was part of hearing. The other thing that we wanted to be able to do with hearing was be able to synchronize our movements with others. If you're out on a hunt or you're trying to protect yourself from an enemy tribe, you need to have coordinated movement. And you mentioned march, and march is one of the most ancient uses of music and body to bind people together. If you are synchronized as a killing apparatus, you're far more effective than if you're all just doing something different from one another. So this is why armies train with marches. It's because they learn to watch and learn from each other's movements.
Well, increases stamina.
Yeah. Work songs, going back thousands of years, right? If you were building the pyramids and you had to do the 1-2 heave-ho and move this big stone up the ramp, you all want to be able to do the heave-ho at the same time. You don't want to have somebody orchestrating your heave-ho, because then you're taking your eyes off your work. So you had work songs. 1, 2, 3, move. One, right, whistle while you work, move.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. So these automatic connections are also important because as bipeds, we are inherently unstable, which is why toddlers fall over. You have to learn to walk. Quadrupeds are stable. Bipeds, you've got balance, and in order for us to move effectively throughout the world, we need to maintain a steady gait. The body has internal timekeepers, internal clocks, that allow us to synchronize our gait and our movements of our legs and ankles and knees and all that. And they get degraded in Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's patients have trouble walking. But music can help them walk again, because we have these populations of neurons that were built for synchrony, as I mentioned. Millions of neurons fire in synchrony to the tempo of music. Everybody now in this room has some neuron. You should be the clapper. You're the rhythmicist here. But
Yeah.
yeah. So everybody's neurons are firing in synchrony to that pseudo beat that you did.
Such good rhythm.
Yes. And so with Parkinson's, if we play music to them, at some point people with Parkinson's lose the ability to maintain a steady gait because those circuits were damaged. But there are backup circuits and supplementary circuits for the music system, which is separate from the speech system and the straight motor
this
system.
is because they would have learned it before the onset of Parkinson's.
They were born with it. Babies are born with this synchronous ability. Yeah, and if you look at babies, they'll swing and sway to match what their parents are doing, or they'll swing and sway to music.
Is there a children's version of Parkinson's where they would be affected by music to improve their gait without having a lifetime of dancing and coordinating with music?
There are. So there are diseases of motor neurons and motor pathways in toddlers, and music can help them also to synchronize their movements. Again, the beat of the music is co-opting certain neural circuits, making them a substitute for the damaged neural clock, internal clock. And that allows you to maintain a steady gait. And people with Parkinson's often get to a point where they cannot walk at all, or they start to walk and they freeze, or they try to walk and they end up running because they have no regulation of it at all. And if you play them music for, say, an hour a day in a therapeutic program over a few weeks, the effects can last for 6 months, even without music, because you're retraining new neural circuits.
Would it, say, Muhammad Ali, who was incredibly coordinated, obviously, but lost his ability to walk, did they know that then?
No.
Was he able to benefit? Or,
No, they didn't
this
know
is a
that
new
then.
discovery that
Yeah.
current sufferers can
Yeah.
benefit from.
Yeah.
Well, this other aspect of the coordination, going back to the evolution of why is music, is that it coordinates not only our physical movements, but our social bonding. And I was once in a cave in Germany where they had a 30,000-year-old flute made from a vulture's femur.
By the way, Stewart made a wonderful documentary about this. He visited the site of the cave for a BBC documentary that I recommend to all of you. I happen to be in it.
The best moments and the most clarity provided by the doctor here. And actually, the brief was, what is music? What's it for? Why do we have? And I would talk to artists, and I would talk to them, and I would say, why is it that we live in palaces and we get to make music and they just got to buy it from us? What do you think what is? And they almost all of them would answer with something like, well, when I write a song, I try and, no, I'm not asking you about your new album. What is music? Why do we do, and most of them don't know, which is why I have to go to the eggheads to explain this shit. And interestingly,
I think you ended up with a scrambled egghead here.
Yeah, well, they don't all agree. And if you'll forgive a little name dropping here, there was once a famous mental scientist, I'm not sure who you would call him, Steven Pinker. Ever heard of him? And he once famously said that music is a spandrel. It has no evolutionary purpose. It's a decoration. It's like cheesecake.
Auditory cheesecake.
Auditory cheesecake. And of course, the world of music erupted in outrage, fury. How dare he? And the poor guy probably regrets it. But he became instantly famous. He wrote a book called How Your Brain Works. It was the first pop book.
How the Brain Works or something like that.
Yeah. And so I went to talk to Mr. Pinker in Harvard in his corner suite with his jars of brain slices. And I started gently.
If you didn't like the way the questions went, you might have ended up with...
I might have been one of those slices. And said, well, Mr. Pinker, you think that music is unnecessary, but surely, since music appears in infants before language does, surely that would indicate that music has a very important function of our language, which is kind of important for Homo sapiens, right? And he says, well, no, that's not established. In fact, we don't think that happens that way at all. Well, I'd like to show you something, Mr. Pinkerface. See here, this is my grandson. He's 2 years old. Well, he was 2 years old, and he's sitting at the Christmas table, and he's sitting there all cute right there, and I got my camera out, and I get my shot. And he's looking, and he looks right in the camera, and he goes, pause. Okay, he's got the articulation. The pitches were a little squirrely, but he got the rhythm, the articulation. Dr. Pinker. He is pre-verbal. He can't form a sentence. He knows 2 or 3 words, dog, mama, whatever, but he can sing a tune. Does that not indicate that music is indeed of an important function of language? That's not relevant, but I could not help in this venue to recount that tale of victory over Mr. Harvard-faced Pinker.
Well, the other problem with Pinker's argument is that my lab had established across several experiments that have been replicated many times now, that the parts of the brain that process music are phylogenetically older, that is, evolutionary older, than the parts that process speech. So setting aside the...
And there are more of them, too.
Yes. So setting aside the developmental course that, yes, all infants go through a period of musical babbling as well as linguistic babbling. Infants understand and can replicate songs before they can replicate sentences, but even setting that aside, the actual brain structures that serve music are older by tens of thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And so...
Well, what was their purpose then?
Well, what we think...
If it didn't lead to language...
It did lead to language,
purpose?
but it was a kind of a proto-language, right? So imagine, and we're speculating because unlike the cave paintings or the bone flute, which left some physical trace, we don't have recordings of that, so we don't really know. But the speculation is that effectively we communicated, Neanderthals and Australopithecines, pre-linguistic hominids, communicated much like the teacher in the Charlie Brown cartoons, where he's going, Where, like
music was
Scooby-Doo,
the difference, though.
So
That cave where I found that bone, the purpose of the bone and the thesis of the archaeologists was that bone showed that Homo sapiens had music.
Right.
You could play, it was not Babel, it was actually pentatonic, and you could play Coltrane on that thing.
Yeah.
But the conclusion that they came to was that the reason that Homo sapiens was able to win over Neanderthal, and even though they had bigger brains than us, bigger teeth than us, they were just better version of bipeds than us, because we had music to bond us as a society, and music would make us, we'd all sing together, and so we could have larger groups of Homo sapiens. So us 20 Homo sapiens could go kick those 5 Neanderthal out of the fruit tree because music was a means of creating larger social groups.
yeah, so this is an important thing too, the power of music to achieve social bonding and cohesion. So if you look at all primate living groups, there's no primate that we know of where they can have more than 150 individuals within the group because interpersonal rivalries tear them apart. But humans have been living in large cities of 5 and 10,000 or more for many, many thousands of years, longer probably. And the reason we believe is that music helps to create bonds. And we now, just in the last 10 years or so, understand what we call the underlying biology of it. When you listen to music together or sing together, even more so, it releases an interesting neural hormone called oxytocin, which, among other things, makes you feel connected and trusting towards the people you're with. So playing music with somebody, generally speaking, releases this trust hormone, notwithstanding certain members of a trio that I know of that were at each other's throats a lot of the time. Just imagine, though, what you would have been without the oxytocin. But,
Well, without the music, we got along great.
Yeah. But so oxytocin is an important thing for bonding. It's what allowed, as you said, larger groups of humans to outwit and outmaneuver groups of Neanderthals. We cooperate. We work together. And the other thing that music does is it comforts us. Not all music, but some music comforts us in the way that mothers comfort infants. And it's the same chemical. When a mother and her infant are nursing, both release a soothing, tranquilizing hormone called prolactin. And we get that listening to sad songs primarily. Not happy songs, but songs that you might characterize as providing comfort. There must be songs that you use, like if you're feeling out of sorts or...
Well, no, there are songs that I cannot listen to because they make me out of sorts. There is some songs like Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes, Wake Up Little Susie. There's a Manu Chao song that I cannot listen to it. I can't get past the first chorus. I have to turn it off.
Because?
It physically hurts. I get so emotional.
Because you like it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But too much. And
Yeah.
there are associations, the Manu Chao song reminds me of my kids who are all grown up, hairy and smelly, and have kids of their own now. And so that takes me, I will never again ride in my Cherokee up to Death Valley with my boys listening to Manu Chao, and that song comes on and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Music is so emotional. And we're learning the neurological reason for that emotion, that gushing. There's actually chemicals with names, oxytocin. But that emotion, has a lot of different effects. One is that clearly God loves music. In church, one of the things that I did was I went to a lot of churches. I went holy rolling in Alabama, and oh my God, the power of the music there and people shaking and everything. I went to the cathedral of my boarding school in England where...
This is all in the documentary.
Yeah, but one of the
that I was in, by the way.
One of them was One of them was the New Age Christian called Hillsong. They've since been discredited, unfortunately. But I went to one of their services in New York City, and it was the pointy shoes, ripped jeans, bad facial hair Christianity. And I'm a cynic, and I went in there all cynical, but I could not deny those. It's like it was like a U2 concert. The lyrics are up there. Because Jesus is our Lord with his mighty sword. And we're all singing. I get it. I feel everybody in the room is joined. I feel good. Okay, I don't believe it. And then the music would die away and he'd start talking. And so it was Easter. And so the cool thing about Jesus is that he was tortured and murdered in front of everybody, and this somehow persuaded God to forgive humanity. And I'm listening to this, and I'm going, what? Can we get that music going again? And as soon as he stopped with whatever the hell he was talking about, and the music comes back in, because, gee, I'm in, I love you, baby, I love everybody here. Because everybody in that room, no matter how cynical I am, everybody in that room is improved, is healed, is cured, is uplifted, is better. And it turns out there is science involved. God loves music. You could comment on that, and then I can go on forever about uses to which music can be put for persuading people.
Yeah. Well, there are about 100 neurochemicals in the brain. We only have...
And you can probably name all of them.
No, I can't, actually.
Oh, really?
Because we only have tools to measure about 7 of them.
Half of them you just made up.
Yeah, well, that's right, yeah. And 95% of statistics, they're made up on the spot.
That's how I do it. That's how I do it.
Yeah. So
it took me a minute to catch that one. You caught that, right?
The 7 neurochemicals that we can directly measure, and then another 10 or so that we can measure indirectly, and so we make assumptions about them. But for the brain to have evolved this very complex chemical soup means that every neurochemical must be doing something that helped us to survive, or possibly more importantly, to attract a mate. That is our prime directive as a species, is to procreate.
That's why all the most famous songs, the most popular music is love songs.
Exactly. So evolution wants us to procreate. It wants us to live long enough to procreate, and then it doesn't really care what happens to us after procreation age. Evolution doesn't care.
That's fucked up.
But it's why we're seeing now as people live longer. You may have heard the expression, children are our future. They're not. Old people are, and lots of them. Yeah. We've got more people over the age
Oldness is our future.
Well, that's right. There's more people over the age of 100 than ever before. And we're living long enough to get diseases that evolution hadn't figured out how to solve for us, like cancer and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. The idea, though, of procreating being a prime directive, all of us are descended from somebody who successfully procreated. Not one of you has an ancestor who failed to procreate. So they would have died out. And so
I remember having to tell a kid in school, your mother is not a virgin. and
you had firsthand experience
this was in
with...
Beirut, Lebanon, where in the Arabic world that is not a positive conversation.
Yeah. So where was I going with this?
Sex. Well, music breaks down boundaries.
Right.
The reason it makes you twitch in public is do that overt sexual display is because without that, you might not make that connection with your mate.
Right. So let's talk about neurochemicals and then get to mating. So the complex neurochemical system is such that we have serotonin, which helps to regulate mood. People who take SSRIs like Prozac or Zoloft, what they're trying to do is to keep whatever serotonin their brain normally produces to stick around in the brain a little longer. Music that you like, not just any music, but music you like, can increase production of serotonin, which in turn signals the production of immune system chemicals like immunoglobulin A, which IgA travels to the site of a mucosal infection and can be protective against flus and colds and coronaviruses. Dopamine is another chemical that's produced when you listen to music you like. That helps you to, depending on where it is in the brain, it does different things. In your frontal lobes, it helps you to pay attention, which is why focus music and meditative music works. It's helping you to literally to focus on one thing and ignore distractors. In the limbic system, deep in the brain, when dopamine's released there to pleasurable music, it creates warm feelings of satisfaction and pleasure and motivates you to seek those again. My lab was the first to show, our lab, now that you're appointed in the lab, our lab was the first to show that...
I graduated from the School of Hard Knocks.
Yes. Our lab was the first to show that dopamine is produced in the brain in the same reward circuit that is active when gamblers win a bet or drug addicts get their drug of choice.
When drug addicts get their dope.
Yep, exactly. Or when you have an orgasm. So this is a well-known reward pathway. We were the first to show that music activates it, and also the first lab to show that the brain, listening to music you like, allows the brain to produce endogenous, internal opioids. You have your own opiate manufacturer in there.
Well, what's the difference between serotonin, dopamine, opioids, and all these other feel-good brain chemicals?
There are subtle differences in the parts of the brain they work on and the ways that they deliver feelings of pleasure, and they all interact with each other. So if you raise the level of one, the others change in response. All of these help to tamp down cortisol, the stress hormone. Cortisol
the what?
The stress hormone.
Stress. Yeah.
Cortisol is what's released when that tiger is coming towards you and you've got to fight or flee. Cortisol is released during a fight or flight reaction, and it's toxic.
Oh, yeah.
And if you have chronic stress, you're going to have gastrointestinal upset chronically, and libido problems, and digestive problems with the gastrointestinal, and also immune system compromise. Why? Because in a situation where a tiger is coming at you, or some danger, somebody with a spear, you've got to conserve all your resources. You've got to fight or flee. You're not going to worry about your immune system. That's a longer-term operation. You're not going to worry about your libido. That's longer term. You're not going to worry about digesting your food. You might become food for that thing that's attacking you. So all these things shut down. And in ancient times, we would either run or fight our way out of a predicament. In modern society, we can have bosses yelling at us and people cutting us off in traffic and keep high stress levels going for weeks or months at a time. And this is one of the leading predictors.
As opposed to a sudden event.
Exactly, which you work off.
That then goes away.
So music is able to suppress cortisol levels, pleasurable music, relaxing music. And so that's what all this has to do with neurochemistry. And the subtleties among the different neurochemicals are a bit technical, but just as a quick one, internal opioids are released when you're actually experiencing the pleasure, dopamine when you're anticipating it. And music is the only stimulus we know of, with the possible exception of food, where the anticipation of the event and the consumption of the event are entwined. So classically speaking, if you are at the dessert counter and you see this chocolate cake and you really want it, you start getting salivating, you're having some anticipatory response. That's dopamine trying to move you towards it, and you're already feeling some pleasure. When you take the first bite, that's your internal opioids that are saying, yeah, that's good. And they remind the dopamine of how you got it, so the dopamine reminds you next time you see one, you want to get it again. But music, because it's manifest across time, and at least in most music we listen to, as it unfolds, you're getting little rewards along the way, and yet it's setting up anticipation of rewards yet to come. And the job of the composer, particularly the film composer...
Create tension and release.
Right. You've got to find that perfect balance where you're rewarding the listener's expectations enough of the time that they don't feel disoriented, but rewarding them enough of the time that they're surprised and they're learning something. This isn't the only way that chord sequence goes.
Or you have a chord sequence where you create an expectation, and it's comforting, and then the fourth time around, the last chord's different.
Yeah, you modulate up a half a step.
And you like that.
Yeah.
I once had my brain MRI.
Bob Bilder.
Huh?
Bob Bilder scanned your brain at
UCLA.
Yeah.
They were doing a thing on creativity, and they put me in the MRI, and they wanted to watch creativity. And Actually, I had to do it twice, because the first time is an example of how even the smartest scientists can screw up. They put me in there for creative. They gave me a bunch of problems to solve creatively. Okay, there's 2 triangles and a square. Which 2 go together? Oh, I guess they're trying, Okay, now we got to, all these kind of puzzles to solve with this creative mind. Oh, God, they pull me out on the tray. So, by the way, guys, that was not my brain being creative. That was not my brain on creativity. That was my brain on hassle. That was, I don't know what you were measuring there, but it doesn't have So they put me, raised some more money, put me back in there and said, this time, think of a piece of music that you know. Da 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 da. Okay, now make up a piece of music. And I'm really getting into it, and they're pulling me out already. And so he shows me the chart and says, okay, these are all the areas of your brain that are lit up by music, which seemed to be most of it. And I asked him, what physical or mental activity uses up so many different parts of the brain? Is it anger? Is it love? Is it sex? Is it whatever? He said, this right here is the most lit up brain I've ever looked at. And weirdly, music uses smell, vision, language, time passing, every possible, almost every brain function somehow is involved in music. How do you explain that?
Music does activate every area of the brain.
Well, creating music also.
Yeah.
And is that a different picture from listening to music?
Not necessarily, because, in fact, I scan Sting's brain.
You found it?
And what he was basically replicating the experiment we'd done with dozens of other people, but I mean, I just threw it in because you had your brain scanned too. All we need to do now is get Andy, and then we got the whole.
Good luck.
So
he's a guitarist.
Yeah, his brain would be really expensive because it's never been used.
That's usually a drummer joke.
It's true.
But while we're at it, what do you throw a drowning guitarist? His amp.
Touché. Generally speaking, when people listen to music and imagine music, it's using identical brain circuits. Imagining music that you've heard before, not creating, a separate issue, but imagining music you've heard before, you're trying to get all those neurons that heard it the first time or the first 100 or 1,000 times back into the same configuration, except you're orchestrating that all internally. And the act of imagining and listening are so closely related that when I look at the brain scans side by side, it's almost impossible to distinguish listening or imagining to music. Now, creating music, because as the great...
There's got to be one extra ingredient in the
Well,
creation.
there is, and it's not what you would think. When people are creating music, they have to shut down a part of their brain. It's not that they're using more of their brain, they're actually using less.
I almost know what you're talking about.
There's a part in the left prefrontal cortex that is the internal editor, the judge, the school marm, the finger wagging,
Yes,
saying,
and that's what you have to turn off.
who do you think you are? That was terrible.
Yeah.
That you're no good. Don't do that again. And Charles Lim, a colleague of mine, had jazz improvisers in a brain scanner, having them improvise over difficult rhythm changes, bebop changes they'd never seen before. And you'd think, and he went into it thinking, oh, there's got to be some bebop area of the brain because this is so hard to do. And what he found was that there was not more activity, there was less. They had to shut down self-consciousness in order to effectively improvise.
Well, I tell young composers that one of the hardest things is exactly what you're talking about, which is just say no to no. Forgive yourself.
I know.
Don't edit or judge yourself. The best music I ever wrote was when I was doing episodic TV. Show comes in Tuesday, churn, ship it Friday. Whether it's my best work or not, there's music on the tape, and under those conditions, wow, those 3-note tricks, that little, that bass line, they arrive in those moments where you haven't got time for judgment. And what I learned from that is sort of what you're talking about, which is the part of your brain which says, that's crap. You haven't got time for that. And if you shut that part down, as you're talking about, that's when the cool shit happens.
And I think audiences know that. I think audiences can sense when something has been worked over too deliberately, and I mean, not in every case. There is, of course, Beethoven was a great artist and craftsman both. I mean, Beethoven, we know from the historical record, from all the variations and scratched out, edited manuscripts, how hard he worked. But inside all of that, there was inspiration, and it's a balance between inspiration and craft. And I think most audiences...
Where did it come from? Dun, 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 dun. Where did it come from?
It's the sound of fate knocking on your door. Let me in. Let me in.
But that kernel of an idea...
Yeah, who knows?
Because I've got to go find some food because I'm hungry, and you start imagining a chicken wing. I got to do this. But music is so amorphous, so meaningless, so formless, so its purpose is not immediately evident. So where does that tune come from?
Yeah, well, all music is based on repetition, as the great poet John Hartford once said. And meaning that...
I got all his albums.
Yeah, I do too. The idea is that what we regard as the most creative works in music tend not to be things that are completely different than anything we've heard before. They are recyclings.
That's right. It's a balance of old and new.
Right. So Mozart, who's perhaps by many people regarded as one of the great composers of all time that we know of, he didn't invent the symphony. Haydn had already done that. It's just that he stretched the boundaries of a set of rules and forms, and he did it with so much creativity. The Beatles did not invent rock and roll, as everybody knows, but what they did with the art form, the way they stretched it. Steely Dan's another example, combining blues and jazz and rock and roll. What many of us consider these to be the most creative artists of our time. They didn't invent something new. You want somebody who invented something new, take Schoenberg. And that's
I guess
unlistenable.
they developed something. I guess you're answering the question, unbelievably. It turns out there is an answer to this timeless question. Where did that kernel of the idea come from? Well, it wasn't the kernel. Some of it is something that you heard before.
Right, and I'm reading a book by Richard Powers that I recommend to everybody called Orfeo, and it's about a composer. And he has this wonderful line where he said the good composer doesn't create music, they discover it.
That's the sensation.
Yeah. And
that's what it feels like to write a tune.
Yes.
It feels more like discovery than creation.
We've talked about this before. We've both had the experience that we've deliberately sat down and we tried to write something and we managed to write it.
That was my day job for 20 years.
Exactly. But we've also had the experience that it's just like you put your catcher's mitt in the air and something lands in it and there it is, fully formed. And maybe you do a few little crafty things to clean it up, but it's basically there as one piece. And where did that come from? It came from all this stuff that you've heard your entire life. You were hearing music in the womb through the amniotic fluid. Mostly bass lines because the water filtered out the high frequencies.
Some kind of synthesis of what you already have heard.
And your music, because it has all these attributes, there's duration. Duration gets, different durations that you perceive get bound together into rhythms into meters. And there are pitches that get bound together into melodies and harmonies and timbre. You've got rhyme and accent structure and all of these different elements. They are a playground for the brain to be playing over and over again, even in your subconscious, and manipulating them. Most composers, and in fact most non-musicians, will say they have a tune stuck in their head at least some of the time, And it's not exactly the tune they heard. Their brain is playing around with it, playing with the form, stretching the melody, stretching the time. And so it comes from all this unconscious work.
I think I became a composer because I have a very bad musical memory. I would hear that tune, and I would try and recreate it wrongly and come up with something else.
So Neil Young said something similar. He has earworms all the time, songs stuck in his head, but he's not very good at remembering them.
Right.
And so he writes music in order to get the earworm out and in order to commit it to
It's like that to-do list. If you're thinking I'm going to need to remember this, just as soon as you write it down on a piece of paper, you can relax and go to sleep. But
Now,
there's something that we ought to establish here, that all of you are very brilliant musicians. You're not all Eric Clapton. Well, okay, I am. Just kidding. Homo sapiens is really good at music, and you're talking about the articulation, the rhythm, the pitches, all that stuff. We're really good at it. And the natural state of music is for all of us to do it together.
Right.
And we live in a modern world of specialization where I get to play the music and you get to buy it from me. But actually, the natural state of music is for everybody to make it. The specialization is a newfangled idea, which has me living in a fancy house up there.
And it's still that way most of the world. Most people in the world, when music is being made, they're all participating.
Yeah.
It's Western society, so to speak, where we've created a separation between the performers and the participants. And I tell a story in the book about a friend of mine, an anthropologist, who went to Lesotho, small country surrounded on all sides by South Africa. He was doing field work. His name's Jim Ferguson, and he had earned their trust, and they invited him to one of their sacred rituals, healing rituals. And they were singing and dancing around a campfire all night. And they asked him to join, and he knew that they finally trusted him after a year of him living among them, because it's this sacred ritual. And he was just sitting there while they were singing and dancing, and they said, well, come on, why don't you sing with us? He said, oh, no, I don't sing.
And then the drums stopped. and all of the Lesothoans, they all ran in fear into the jungle. And your friend is asking, where'd everyone go? Well, the drums stopped. Bass solo. Just keeping it real.
It was a sentence that had never before been spoken in that language. I don't sing.
Uh-huh.
They said, you speak, of course you sing. And he said, I don't dance. What do you mean you don't dance? You have both your legs, of course you dance. Yeah. You know, it was just
that's
singing.
Amazing. That's why I brought that up, is because most of you probably don't understand how good you could everybody in this room can sing a song.
Yeah.
Not as well as Adele, but you can sing a song. And like my college buddy that I was, he sends me tapes of him and his buddies playing acoustic guitars in the living room. They're playing Beatles songs or whatever like that. And he sends it to me, what do you think? And he's all kind of shy and embarrassed. I'm thinking, dude, that's the real thing. That's the real music. When you buy my music or something, it's second best. It's okay. You can buy it off the shelf. But when you make it yourself, which you can do, it's so rewarding. You don't need I can't do music. Yes, you can.
And it's a funny thing. It's about the only thing in society that the average person feels uncomfortable doing, where, I don't mean the only thing, but I mean when you compare it to other things, like you never hear anybody say, I am no Martin Luther King, so I'm not going to talk, right? Or I'm no Shaquille O'Neal, I'm not going to play hoops. I'm not going to even try to throw a basketball. But there's something about music.
Yeah, it's a little more ouchy, yeah.
It's stigmatized, and it shouldn't be. We are all musicians.
Oh, yes, it should be. That's why I get to live in that house.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you try this at home, folks. I gotcha.
We do have musical brains. The human brain is Oliver Sacks called us a musical species. The brain is wired for sound. It's wired for music. It's wired for... Here's something that proves that we're wired for music. Jazz proves it, in that what a jazz musician does typically is they take a song you know well, and they change a bunch of stuff. They change the rhythm, they change the chords, they might change the melody when they're soloing, and yet almost all of us, depending on how sophisticated the jazz is and how much we
Well,
listen.
how clever they are if you can still recognize it,
Right.
in spite of all that.
Well, that's right. What that means, though, is it's less about their cleverness and more about the cleverness of your brain. You can recognize Happy Birthday sung in any key, at any tempo. You could recognize it as a samba, or as a heavy metal song, or as a country song. You can manipulate music in an infinite variety of ways, and the song retains its identity. So
Well,
we
there were
are
those
musical.
tests that you showed me how this works, where Daniel came over to my house and he played some experience. He played one thing, went, "Gang!" That's it. What is it?
Benny and the Jets.
Nope, it wasn't.
Oh,
It was Rites of Spring.
Oh, yeah, well, that's right. Yeah.
It was just that one chord, "Gang!"
Yeah.
Not dung, 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 dung. It was just
Yeah.
dung.
Yeah.
And
I even played you some stuff backwards. And you
played some
recogni-
stuff backwards?
I played you one note of Eleanor Rigby backwards.
yeah,
And he recognized it.
well, some of Eleanor Rigby, I think, is backwards. Or is that another Beatles
You're
song?
thinking of I'm Only Sleeping.
Yeah, right. No, but it's amazing that what you're saying is how the brain can take just a few musical, I think it probably can do this with other things as well, but just a few musical elements, you pick those out, you throw away all the samba and the heavy metal and everything else and get back to Happy Birthday.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how the brain can do that.
So that's one of the reasons it activates all these different areas of the brain, to bring this full circle
Right.
to your earlier question. There are all these different operations that are processed separately in the brain. Melodies in one part, rhythms in another, timbre, the sound of instruments, that's in another. They're distinct neural circuits. They all come together later, but after the sound leaves your eardrums and goes to your brain, they're processed separately in 10 or 20 different neural modules separately. And we've seen people with brain damage who lose their ability to detect rhythm, but everything else is intact. Or they lose the ability to remember or recognize melodies, but everything else is intact. So we know they're separate. It comes together later, where later is like 40,000ths of a second, which is so fast you don't realize that it was ever separated. So music's hitting all those different areas of the brain, and at the same time, it's invoking your memory of the last time you heard the song or a song like it, and so it's dredging up feelings based on memory and associations that you have. And one of the reasons that it can be so healing, and we've barely scratched the surface, but Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis,
And memory diseases as well.
serious memory impairment, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression. I devote a separate chapter to each of these in the book. But one of the reasons it can do all this is because different brain areas are affected by these different diseases or injuries, and music hits all these different areas.
The Parkinson's one is easy to understand because walking is a rhythm, and if you stimulate the rhythm part of the brain, that will aid in walking. But memory and music are very connected. Musical memory, every musician knows, it's a weird thing, how you can remember music longer than you can remember anything else. And anecdotally from my side, I can remember a song, we did a Police reunion, we hadn't seen each other in 30 years. Andy starts out, dick, 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 yeah, bong, rocks, and play the song right down. We haven't seen each other in 30 years. We know how to, every part of this, it's all there. One time I did a Beatles thing at the Bowl with George Martin, and I got to be Ringo for the night. And they sent me the playlist of the Beatles songs that we were going to be doing. It was all the orchestral things that he did. And put on the first tune, I forget what it was, but put on the song, and I played the song down. The first chorus is a double chorus, the second, I wasn't even a Beatles fan. Musical memory is an incredibly clear and tenacious form of memory.
It's because music is so highly structured. There are only 12 notes, really, and then they repeat over the octaves. We all possess a very well-developed sense of the tonal hierarchy, meaning we know what notes are most likely. We've established, actually, through neuroscientific studies, you may not know this, but we've got probabilistic maps in our brains about what notes are most likely to follow in a sequence. That's why
I'm playing an A. There's probably going to be an E coming up.
Yeah. But depending on the style, maybe not in Chinese opera.
Yeah, true.
So, but you learn the music of your culture, and so music is so highly structured, which means that there are a lot of different brain regions representing it. And
that map that when I went to see the guy and they pulled me out of the tray, so many areas.
Yeah,
It's
so
seemingly unrelated.
and the other thing that is, the principle of memory is that the stuff that you remember first stays in the longest. Childhood memories are the last to go, because your memory builds like layers of bark on a tree, out, 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 out. So when you get a brain damage or brain disease like Alzheimer's or dementia, it's the current memories you lose. And we've seen Alzheimer's patients who don't recognize their loved ones, they don't know where they are, they don't recognize their surroundings, they may not even recognize themselves in a mirror. They'll walk by a mirror and start up a conversation with the person in the mirror, and then either think that, you know, when they point to the person and the person points back, they might think that that person is mocking them. And all of this leads to a profound sense of dis-ease and disorientation, and Alzheimer's patients will have one of two reactions to this generally. They'll either fold in on themselves because the external world makes no sense, or they get really angry and violent, which is what happened to Glenn Campbell, and his wife Kim had to put him in a home because he was being physically violent, not understanding what was going on around him in the later stages. And at
terror, probably.
At that terror, exactly. But a month earlier, he was playing the Forum. I had seen the brain scans of Glenn's Alzheimer's, and half his brain was not working, but he was still the best guitar player on the planet.
Well, then there's the Lady Gaga story.
About Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett. I don't know if some of you probably know this, saw the documentary on TV, but Tony Bennett, great singer, and was the great hero of Lady Gaga. And for some reason, they persuaded him to do a show in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Who thought that was a good idea? Who knows? And Lady Gaga, in the rehearsal, she had to introduce herself to him every day, but he could still play the songs and everything. And in the documentary, it's a real heart twister. He walks out on stage, and as soon as the lights hit him, his eyes twinkle, he lights up, and he leans in, and he sings those songs, not just carrying the tune, but with the nuance, the charisma, the X factor. He's just completely in command of the medium. It's a brilliant show. Next morning, he's walking in the park with Lady Gaga, who had to introduce herself to him again, and he has no memory of having played a show the night before.
No new
and
memories.
Yet,
but
all the complexity of the melody, the rhythm, all the different aspects that comprise music, all that was not a problem. Who this person he's been working with for a month is a problem.
That's exactly right. And when we encounter patients in assisted living facilities or old age homes that are turned in on themselves, the violent ones tend to get medicated, so they won't be violent.
No music for them.
But well, the biggest effects are with the catatonic ones, where they're just not paying attention. And if you play the music from their youth, they suddenly rediscover themselves. They know who they are again. They remember that person they were.
Take that, Mr. Pinker.
Yeah. Mr. Harvard face. And for the ones who were sedated, if you can get them titrate off the sedation and then play the music, it's the same effect. They recognize songs from their youth, typically the ages of 10 to 20. It's all in there. They remember it. They can sing along. And the effects of simply hearing music you like for half an hour when you've got advanced Alzheimer's can improve your mood and actually cause you to start speaking again and noticing your surroundings and become engaged. Can last for days.
Why, related to that, is music so persuasive? For 20 years, they paid me the big bucks as a film composer. And music in film is really interesting scientifically, because imagine a scene in the movie where the moon is shining, the handsome guy says to the beautiful woman, "I love you." Everything, all your eyes are telling you that this is beautiful, it's romantic, everything. But the plot of the movie is that he's a son of a bitch. And the director wants you to know that he's a lying scumbag. So they hire me to put the shit chord in there. I love you, baby. And you will believe my music rather than the moon, Tom Cruise, the beautiful woman. You will believe the emotional message of the music before you believe your lion eyes. And beyond that even is that in life you are driven not by facts and decisions and logic, you're driven by your emotions. And music tells you how to feel and therefore what to do, which is why God loves music.
So I think people in my field of neuroscience of music have come to with this sort of pithy saying that music is the language of emotion. Unlike speech.
And would you support the notion that emotion is more important to determine your behavior
Yeah.
than logic?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can't argue somebody out of a position they didn't argue themselves into in the
You
first
can't argue
place.
with a poet.
Basically, people decide based on their gut instinct or their emotions, not on
And they
logical
pretend
arguments.
and they evolve a logic
Right.
to support what my music told them to feel.
And so when you think about the function of language, it's usually to refer to very specific things like, bottle, table, shirt, or abstract things but that have a particular meaning like justice or jealousy or intellect. These are concepts that are well defined. Music is amorphous, as you had, to borrow your term, and it's open-ended. It doesn't mean something specific. Its ambiguity is part of its power. And so 100 people could listen to a single song and all have different emotions from it. And yet they could have very similar brain activity from the acoustical part, very different activity from
I
the
know
emotional
musicians who
part.
go to see a concert, and I'm going, these guys suck! I hate them! Which is weird how musicians are like that.
And then we've done studies where we have people listen to music that's very different acoustically, like heavy metal or country or classical, but it's their favorite song. And the genre has nothing to do with it. The brain activity is almost identical because it's all this pleasure and this feeling of enjoyment. Getting back to the other idea, though, we're kind of meandering across a very large terrain here, but one core idea...
It's a huge subject.
It is. One core idea is that the right piece of music, the right sequence of chords, can invoke in you feelings you cannot put into words. Music can make you feel happy and sad at the same time, like you were describing.
Happy, sad, or, quite different, sad, happy.
Yeah? Or what you were describing was a deep sense of beauty. And I mean, when you were talking about that, your children and the Wagoneer, I was thinking, if I have songs that make me feel that way, and it's a combination of awe at the beauty, trepidation that this is going to unleash some emotions that I'm not sure I want to have come out. Regret.
Better turn that off now before I embarrass myself.
Regret that those times are over. Longing for those times again. Happy that I had the time. Sad that I don't. How could you possibly express that in language so succinctly as in a 3-minute song?
And yet, music is very, very specific. Yes, it's amorphous, but in a film, the director isn't just happy or sad or trust or distrust. It's very finely tuned and specific.
Well,
and certain chords, there's a difference between happy, sad. I'm so happy, but my father died, but he's gone to a good place, and it's happy, sad. Sad, happy is I don't even know, but there's kind of a difference in what I learned in my 20 years before the mast as a hired gun, professional, heartlessly making music to drive emotions, manipulating emotions, is how specific it is. And how the director, he doesn't know anything about music, but he says that this scene has this emotional content, and I try and hit it. He says, no, it's got a little bit too much happiness. I need to bring up the sadness. The amazing thing is how specific it is.
It is, and it's precisely your point earlier that Rembrandt can't make you feel that powerfully as music can. And it's because of music's connections to all these different brain areas and to the movement centers and to the deep emotional centers that are associated with taking drugs and eating and drinking and having sex. And so, yes, music can change your mind, or at least change your heart, and then the mind would follow.
That's how churches work.
And it can disambiguate a movie scene that's otherwise ambiguous because it has such direct access to the most primitive reptilian parts of your brain. I think we have to move to questions.
Yes, thank you so much. I work with a lot of people with trauma, and I'm wondering what is the evidence that you have as far as using music with people with PTSD?
So I'm going to answer in two parts, even though there are not two-part questions. I think we're allowed two-part answers. There's a deep literature on PTSD going back to World War II. There are two ways that music can be used to help recover from PTSD. One is songwriting. Songwriting Soldiers is an organization. It's also a technique. Allowing yourself to free associate within the confines or the structure of a rhythm and a melody and chords is a much easier way than standard talk therapy because the momentum of the music keeps going, so you have to come up with some words. And it's easier to free associate that way and thereby to recontextualize the trauma, songwriting either in a group or individually. And then also just listening to music while you're recalling the bad times and helping the music because it reduces cortisol to desensitize you to the trauma. The other thing I would say is one of the things we talk a lot about in the field and that you and I have spoken a lot about over the years is it the song or is it the singer?
Don't get me started.
And certainly in terms of therapy, there are probably at least 50 different kinds of psychotherapy out there. I mean, the obvious ones like Freudian and Jungian and cognitive behavioral therapy and on and on and on. It turns out from 100 years of studying this stuff, the therapeutic approach is far less important than the therapist. And Geraldine Glass, who's sitting here...
Therapeutic approach is more important
far less important than the therapist.
Right.
The therapist is key,
Right.
not the technique they're using. Geraldine Glass, who's sitting here in the front row, leads what you might call sound baths. She does healing sessions with crystal singing bowls. And one of the research questions is, are the bowls magical? Are the bowls healing? And although we haven't done the experiments yet, I'm almost certain that you could give Geraldine 2 Dixie cups on a string or a bunch of bottles, and it might not have as strong effect as these gorgeously tuned and finely crafted instruments, but that a lot of the effect is in the therapist. Their spirit, the fact that...
Well, empathy, a human being you empathize with,
empathy,
has got to be powerful.
Yeah.
Man, I've got a big gong like that and a huge gong. And a huge gong. You whack that thing and I've got a chair.
Did you say gong with a G?
Yeah. And you sit in front of it, and I don't even know what chakras are, but they will fix your chakras. This thing, it's like, yay high, and it vibrates like that, and you lean in the chair up against it, like that, and it just makes you vibrate down to your tippy toes out to,
But with music, I think it's important to recognize that there are probably not magic songs, but the combination of a great song and a great performer. It is the singer. It's very much the singer. And there are some great musicians here in the room with us. I see Jeff Silbar and I see Dick Hardwick and Dean Parks and Dylan O'Brien, and these are amazing musicians who can elevate any song and make you feel better. And they can play the same instrument, they could play a barred instrument, they could play an instrument that's not particularly high quality. There's just something about their touch that...
Well, these people that you've just spotted, I think you're all songwriters. And this is the great dichotomy. Is it the shrink or is it the technique? And the great debate, and a certain band I know, Is the band there to serve the song? Or is the song there just as something cool for the band to do? The song is there to serve the band. You know, and Jimi Hendrix, who cares what he's singing about? Just listen to what he's doing. That's what jazz is all about.
I should mention Michael Brook, too.
Yeah.
Michael Brook is a guitar player and a composer, film composer. But one of the magical things that I've heard Michael do is just we spend a lot of time together, and he'll pick up my guitar and play something that I was playing, and it suddenly sounds 1,000% better because he's got that touch. There's a healing aspect to a musician's touch that's quite apart from what they're playing and what they're playing it on. And you have that too, of course.
Well, we could go. I could come back, but there's probably some more questions there. I mean, the whole thing about the singer, the song versus the player, is a whole world of debate.
If you were to get more people to sing, get Americans to sing together, how would you advise writers, producers to create a new category of music, adult contemporary sing-along music?
Well, you got to have something to sing about, I guess. And this is the thing of a song is something cool for the players to do. And you're asking how you get a bunch of people to sing together. I guess we got to go to the songwriter, and he's got to give him one of his stupid songs that we got to do and fealty to the song. But I guess hopefully that does answer your question. How do you get all those people to sing? I'd like to teach the world to sing. I guess you got to give them a song.
Well, no, this is what Bobby McFerrin does, though, for a living. He goes out to
He
stadiums.
goes out and he does that thing.
60,000 people. He says, all of you sing ba, and you over here sing ba,
Yeah.
and then you over here sing bum ba dum ba dum ba dum. You know, and
He does this incredible thing. I've done that with him, where he shows his audience that they're better at music than they think.
Yeah.
He'll give you 3 notes, and he bounces. Okay, when I bounce on this one, you sing that note. When I bounce on this one, you sing that note. And he goes, that note, that note, that note, that note, that note, and everybody knows what that note is.
Even though he didn't tell him.
He didn't have to tell him. Question?
As a songwriter, you mentioned that there are differences between listening to music and creating music. Can you elaborate more about this? Is it one and the same? Or what's happening that makes some people write music and others cannot do that?
Well, I think we can all make music. The part about thinking up a new tune is another step beyond that. But I suspect, and maybe you can help illuminate, I suspect that everyone in this room
Everyone
can also
can write
think
songs.
up a tune as well.
Infants write songs.
Yeah.
Infants are writing songs all the time. The only difference between infants writing songs and professional songwriters is that somewhere along the line, somebody told the infant, don't do that. You're no good at it.
Yeah.
And maybe they told that the professional songwriter, and they
Sting
just kept
told
going.
me that all
but-
the time.
Yeah. But no, we all can write songs, whether they're going to be songs other people want to hear or not. That's out of our control. I had a conversation like this one with Paul Simon once, and somebody in the audience says, why don't you write songs the way you used to? And Paul said, I don't know what that means. Do you want me to write songs like I'm 24 years old again? Or do you want me to write songs that make you feel like you felt when you were 24? He says, it's just basically my whole career, I've just written songs I wanted to hear. And for a while, other people wanted to hear it too. And I don't know why. The songs that I wanted to hear, I didn't have any favorites, just some people wanted to hear those. They didn't want to hear those. Got nothing to do with me. So, yeah, you can all write songs, and whether other people want to hear it is a separate issue.
Well, there's another
and it
factor
shouldn't
to
stop
that.
you.
There's another factor to that, which is familiarity. Every band knows that when they go out and they play their new album, the new songs die. Their last album kills it. By the end of the tour, where the new album is on the radio, it's in their record collection, now those same songs are killing it. And so, familiarity is really important. And when they asked Paul Simon, how come you don't write songs like when you were young, they're missing something very important. That the songs that he wrote when he was young, they've been listening to all their
For
lives.
50 years,
and they
yeah.
have emotional impact that his newest song can never have. So
Yeah.
he is writing songs as good
Yeah,
as,
I think so.
as back then. But what that person who asked that question didn't understand was that the reason they like those older songs is because they had experiences to them, they, baggage. When you play the old hits, they just have much more impact than your new song.
Yeah.
You go see Paul McCartney, and God bless him, he has a right to do this, but every time it is a song off my new album. I mean, he's just as good a songwriter, but those old songs are the ones with the emotional wallop.
I have a friend who is a fantastic woodwind player, but she's completely tone deaf. She can't recreate any tonal changes. She's just total monotone.
You mean she's tone deaf when she sings,
Yes,
not
yes,
on the
yes.
woodwind?
No, when she sings. I don't understand that.
Well, the vocals are like a muscle. I mean, she hasn't
It's like
learned
her instrument. She had to learn how to play her instrument.
she
doesn't
hasn't
even
learned to
hear.
control the muscle in her throat. That's all.
She can hear music beautifully.
Yeah,
But she can't
well, she may not have control over it, and she may have what we call a self-monitoring deficit, where she doesn't know that she's not singing the notes in tune.